Let's get the read on all of this from Karl Rove, what he makes of that. Karl, what do you think?
Well, we've got a very emotional issue here, strong feelings on both sides. Might be good to step back and take a look at the last time we actually had something done on this, which was in 2018. You may remember in November of 2017, there was a mass shooting in Sutherland Springs, Texas. A former airman who shouldn't, because of his military record, been allowed to purchase a gun, killed nearly 24 people in a shooting that centered around the First Baptist Church of that town. Two senators decided they were going to do something about it. Democrat Senator Murphy of Connecticut and Republican John Cornyn of Texas. Those names are familiar because those are the same two men who are attempting to find something to do this time around that would be constructive. And what they did that last time was, the issue was that federal and state agencies turned out not to be supplying to the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, the NICS system is what it's called, the names of people who shouldn't be allowed to buy guns. So the first thing they did was they made certain that state and federal agencies who were not downloading this data were being forced to, upon some penalties, to provide that data. They upgraded the reporting systems to make them faster and more accurate. They expanded the sharing of data among about people who shouldn't be able to buy guns among different agencies. And then they also took the opportunity to say a lot of these issues of people who shouldn't be able to purchase guns are not criminal matters. They're found in protective orders, say in a divorce or a family law issue. So they had a domestic abuse and violence prevention initiative that they tied into this. And what happened? Took from November when the massacre occurred to March of 2018 to write the bill, get the support, and pass it with big bipartisan votes in the House and the Senate. And in the next year alone, 6 million names of people who shouldn't be allowed to purchase a gun because of criminal activity or something in their background under state and federal law were added to the NICS system. And it's a sign of what we can do if you focus on the problem at hand and try and find common sense solutions to that, rather than doing what the House is doing, which is taking every gun control desire of the left and tossing it into a gigantic bill and saying, vote for it or else.
You know, then there's the issue of privacy advocates who don't like background checks in general, at least those that might be considered too sweeping. In the case of the Texas shooter, there's an issue about, even though he didn't have a criminal record, he might have had a number of youthful indiscretions, that's probably a polite way of putting it, that never showed up, because we do have a history in this country of not putting them on permanent records because this notion of kids do stupid things, why should it stick with them for life? But what do you make of that, and whether that part of it is something that, let's say, Republicans would be open to not only expand this list and get a good idea of those who might be risky, but going back to childhood issues?
Well, we had two states, Florida and Indiana, which are red states, that passed red flag laws because they wanted to get themselves into a position where if somebody was saying something that was problematic, that there were tools available to law enforcement and to the justice system to keep them from getting weapons. But that that may be the way to go. I would say this, however, it all starts with people speaking. If you see something, say something, and you have to have people speak out. Apparently, the young man in question in Uvalde was text messaging or communicating via social media with a number of young girls and making violent threats. Somebody should have spoken up. Somebody should have said to their parent, Dad, this guy, I don't know him, but he's saying ugly things. And because we've got to detect these people before they reach the breaking point. And he gave out signs, but apparently the system didn't. We don't have a red flag law in Texas, but even absent that, law enforcement could have gotten involved if somebody had said, he's making violent threats, somebody ought to look into this.
Yeah, and then does that take the next leap and get in someone's record at a time when they're trying to get weapons in the first place? But stepping back from this, Karl, I wonder how long this momentum or this appearance of momentum lasts. You mentioned Senator Cornyn, who's leading this charge for Republicans at the behest of Mitch McConnell. I'm just wondering, the 2018 experience notwithstanding, whether we'll get anything here.
Well, we don't know, but I will say this. Murphy and Cornyn have made this work before in a way that the country applauded. and let's give them a chance to do it again. Remember, though, it took, back then in 2017, it took from November to March to get it done. So it took 5 months. And we're now find ourselves in June. That would mean we'd pass something by, around Election Day or shortly thereafter. But this ought to be outside of politics. The president did not do a good service to the country by wrapping the Republicans and going overboard in some of his speech the other night. Certainly here in Texas, Robert Francis O'Rourke did not do this cause any good by showing up at a news conference to brief the media on what was going on in Uvalde, shows up at an official news conference and begins wagging his finger at the governor of Texas, saying, "This is on you." What a great way to bring the country together. Say, I'm your political opponent, and you got blood on your hands. And then he uses it for fundraising purposes. I think he sent out like 13 fundraising emails, all based around that stupid invasion of the news conference that he conducted this previous week.
I always forget. It's Beto O'Rourke you're talking about. I always love you. It's Robert Francis
That's
O'Rourke.
not how he appears on the ballot. He's Robert Francis O'Rourke on the ballot.
No,
I'm just
you're
giving
absolutely
him the respect and ballot name.
I noticed that. Thank you very much. Karl Rove, have a good weekend, my friend.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.